If your money isn't working harder than you are, you're already losing the race, even if you don't feel it yet. You know, people love to complain. They say the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and somehow it's all a conspiracy. But I want to start with a very simple idea you can tattoo on your forehead if you need to. The world doesn't care how you feel. It cares what you do. If you sit still while the world compounds, you fall behind. It's that simple. You don't need PhDs, governments, or philosophers to explain it. If you want to stop feeling poor, the very first thing you must change is not your bank balance, your tax situation, or your job title. It's the way you think about money. Most people behave like trained consumers. They work, they earn, and they immediately start looking for something to purchase that makes them feel better, look better, or appear wealthier than they actually are. It's a treadmill disguised as progress. You run sweat and exhaust yourself, but you never move an inch forward financially. You may get a bit more comfort, but comfort has a nasty habit of costing you compounding wealth. People get trapped in this cycle because they believe money exists to be spent. But money is a seed. Plant it, and it grows. Spend it, and it dies. Owners understand this instinctively, or they learn it painfully early. They don't throw money at every passing desire. They deploy it strategically, like a general allocating limited forces across a battlefield. The goal is not to feel rich today. It's to ensure you are rich tomorrow. That is a mindset, not a privilege. Being an owner doesn't require millions of dollars. It requires the discipline to say, before I consume, I accumulate. You save first, you invest first, you build first. The leftovers, after you've done the intelligent thing, are what you get to enjoy. But most people reverse the order. They buy comfort up front and then hope something is left to invest. Hope, I'm afraid, is not a strategy. You win this game by design, not luck. When you begin to think like an owner, something interesting happens to the way you evaluate choices. You stop asking, can I afford this? And start asking, what will this cost me in compounding wealth? That 300 impulse purchase isn't 300. It's 300 that could have become 3,000 or more over the next decade. Ownership teaches you to respect the opportunity cost embedded in every transaction. The rich master this calculation. The average person ignores it and quietly pays the penalty for 40 years. Ownership also forces patience. A rare commodity in a world addicted to instant gratification. When you're a consumer, you want the dopamine hit today. When you're an owner, you're content to delay satisfaction because you know you're buying something far more valuable: freedom. Freedom from financial anxiety. Freedom from the treadmill. Freedom from needing someone else to rescue you. The greatest luxury in life is control over your time, and ownership is the only reliable path to get it. The irony is that most people admire the results of ownership, wealth, security, dignity, while resenting the behavior that produces it. They see a rich person and think luck, connections, or unfair advantage. They rarely see the decades of prudent decisions, the sacrifices, the delayed purchases, the compounding, and the thousands of temptations deliberately resisted. You won't feel wealthy for the first several years you behave like an owner. You might even feel poorer, but the fruit grows in silence before anyone sees the orchard. Of course, none of this is glamorous. There's no thrill in skipping the newest gadgets or the third dinner out. There's no applause for funneling your income into assets instead of lifestyles. But the market loves these invisible sacrifices. Time multiplies them in the dark. Then one day, without theatrics, you wake up on the other side of the divide. You don't feel poorer anymore. You don't envy the wealthy anymore. You've joined them. And it all started because you changed the way you thought about money. Government taxes don't decide your financial destiny. Your habits do. If you rely on a government policy to save you, elevate you, or make you wealthy, you have already surrendered control of your life. And I can promise you something firm. After nearly a century of living and investing, politicians are not coming to rescue you. They barely manage their own budgets. Expecting them to manage your future is like giving your wallet to a gambler and hoping he'll return with profit. You might get a story, but you won't get your money. People obsess over tax rates, inflation data, and economic news, yet ignore the daily behaviors that quietly determine whether they will be financially secure or perpetually worried. You could cut taxes to zero, and many people would still end up broke within a few years. Why? Because they've trained themselves to consume everything they earn the moment. It reaches their hands. They are constantly trying to outrun their expenses instead of shrinking them, and constantly hoping income will magically grow while their discipline stays the same. It doesn't work that way. Wealth obeys mathematics, not wishful thinking. Inflation is the silent tax that most people never see stealing from them. When you don't invest, when you don't own assets, and when you sit in cash believing you're being responsible, time slowly erodes your purchasing power until you wake up one day and discover that the same paycheck buys half the lifestyle you were used to. The tragedy is that this erosion happens so gradually that people don't panic until they're already trapped. They blame the government, the economy, the rich, anyone but the mirror. Yet the cure is simple. Put your money where inflation can't devour it without resistance. Invest in assets that grow faster than prices rise. Habits compound just like capital does. Someone who saves 10 or 20% of every dollar they touch is building immunity against uncertainty, whether they realize it or not. Someone who spends their entire paycheck, and worse, borrows against their future earnings, is building a time bomb with a delayed fuse. You don't need genius-level intelligence to see which path leads to stability and which one ends in anxiety. But most people choose the path of least resistance: spend now, worry later. Later eventually comes, and it arrives bigger than anyone expects. What separates those who end up financially calm from those who end up financially desperate is not luck, tax codes, or political cycles. It's behavior. The rich understand that every dollar saved strengthens the foundation beneath their feet. Every dollar invested plants a seed that time will multiply. Every dollar wasted extends dependence on a paycheck and shortens the runway of freedom. Once you internalize that, taxes start to feel like mere noise in the background instead of the villain of your story. Control what you can control, and the world becomes far less threatening. One of the most powerful decisions you can make is to design your finances so that you do not rely on the kindness of elected officials. Build your own parachute. Reduce your vulnerability to bad policy, inflation, layoffs, and chaos by taking responsibility for your habits today. The feeling of empowerment that comes from knowing your financial life is guided by choices instead of circumstances is worth more than any government rebate check. The world rewards people who behave rationally over long periods of time. Save first. Invest automatically. Spend thoughtfully. Educate yourself relentlessly. If that doesn't sound exciting, good, it means it works. Most people chase dramatic changes, but wealth comes quietly from boring discipline. And unlike tax brackets, discipline is always under your control, which makes it the most reliable tool you'll ever possess. Complaining about inequality won't raise your income by a single penny, yet millions of people treat complaining as a full-time occupation. They point fingers at corporations, billionaires, unfair systems, and past injustices as if outrage is a currency that can be deposited and compounding like capital. It doesn't work that way. Anger spends energy. It doesn't create value. The moment you assign blame for your financial position to someone else, you quietly hand over power you should have been using to improve yourself. Responsibility may feel heavy, but it's the only weight that builds strength. People believe their problems are external. They'll say, if taxes were lower, if salaries were higher, if the rich didn't hoard wealth. But I've watched decades of societies rise and fall, markets boom and crash, governments tax and untax, and through all of it, one truth holds, in every environment, about 5% of people find a way to win. They adapt. They learn. They take the rules, however imperfect, and still get ahead. That should tell you something profoundly uncomfortable. Circumstances matter far less than behavior. The uncomfortable reality is that most people are not outworked, they're out prepared. They are not crushed by inequality, they are defeated by inaction. When others are studying, they are scrolling. When others invest, they spend. When others build scarce skills, they cling to whatever is easiest and familiar. It's human nature to desire comfort, but comfort is a terrible financial strategy. It rewards you briefly today, only to punish you severely tomorrow. The richest resource on the planet is not oil, gold, or technology. It's human potential. But most people refuse to mine it. They wait for motivation, for inspiration, for fairness, for better conditions. Meanwhile, the rare individual who decides to improve, whether through reading, learning, practicing a valuable craft, slowly separates from the pack. People will call them lucky years later, blind to the thousands of hours that compounded quietly in the background. The world rewards competence. It always has and always will. There is a secret hiding in plain sight. The wealthiest people are usually not the best talkers, but the best learners and the best doers. They don't waste time comparing themselves to others. They compare themselves to who they were yesterday. They study those who've succeeded because they know models are leverage. Why reinvent the wheel when you can copy the blueprint of someone who has already rolled it up the hill? Envy blocks imitation, and imitation is the fastest legal way to climb. If you can swallow pride long enough to study someone ahead of you, you'll start gaining ground faster than you expect. Inequality becomes irrelevant the moment you start focusing on your own progress instead of everyone else's advantages. You don't need equal outcomes to win. You need an unfair advantage of your own. Discipline, specialized knowledge, frugality, persistence, or simply the refusal to quit when others lose interest. These are edges available to every human alive, yet only a minority take them seriously. The rest prefer stories over statistics, excuses over execution. If you want power back in your hands, start moving. The smallest action beats the loudest complaint. Learn one new skill that makes your time more valuable. Read one book that expands your decision making. Save and invest dollars that used to evaporate into consumption. Over months and years, you'll compound your ability, your opportunities, and eventually your income. The gap between you and the person who only complains will grow so large you won't hear their voices anymore. At that point, inequality won't be something you fear. It will be the backdrop against which your own results shine. The rich keep getting richer, not because they are favored by fate, but because they understand something most people refuse to learn: money is a worker. It does not sleep, it does not take vacations, it does not ask for raises, and it never complains. It just works. Quietly, relentlessly, and often invisibly. When you give money time to compound, you are essentially hiring employees that multiply without rest. Meanwhile, the average person treats money like a temporary visitor, allowing it to come in one door and leave through another without extracting a minute of labor from it. If you want to escape financial struggle, you must stop being a passerby in the economy and start becoming a participant in capital. In the beginning, the difference between the consumer and the investor is almost unnoticeable. Two people may start with the same income and live similar lifestyles, but one sets aside a small portion each month and puts it to work, maybe in stocks, a rental property, a business, or even a low-risk index fund. The other spends every dollar trying to upgrade comfort in the present moment. For months or even years, the investor doesn't look much richer than the spender. Sometimes, paradoxically, they look poorer because they drive the older car or skip unnecessary luxuries. But behind the scenes, something powerful is brewing. Capital is accumulating, seeds are being planted, and ownership is quietly taking root. Time is the great separator. 10 years pass, then 20, and the person who invested has now accumulated an army of dollars that produce more income than their job once did. The consumer, on the other hand, is stuck in the same cycle of earning and spending, often working harder as time goes on because expenses rise while savings stagnate. Life doesn't get easier for them, it gets heavier. The investor moves toward freedom, while the consumer moves toward dependency. That is not luck, that is arithmetic. Most people imagine wealth as sudden, like winning the lottery, stumbling into a brilliant business idea, or cashing in on some secret opportunity. In reality, wealth is usually slow, boring, and methodical. It is the result of patient compounding, repeated over decades. It rewards the disciplined, not the dramatic. And compounding has a funny sense of humor. It does almost nothing for a long time, then suddenly everything changes. People call it overnight success, not realizing the night was about 7,000 days long. One of the most astonishing things I learned in life is that you do not need extraordinary talent to build wealth. You only need to avoid stupid decisions and give your money time to work. Avoiding stupidity is much easier than chasing brilliance. You don't need to be the smartest investor, just a disciplined one. Stay away from debt you can't manage. Stay in the market longer than you're out. Avoid speculation disguised as opportunity. And let compounding quietly do the heavy lifting. Most people sabotage themselves not with one catastrophic mistake, with thousands of small ones. Impulse spending, financial procrastination, and the belief that tomorrow is the day they'll get serious. The rich do something else that most people never consider. They make their money behave. They control it instead of being controlled by it. They design systems, automatic investing, business ownership, income streams that continue to produce results even when they sleep. The average person, meanwhile, constantly reacts to circumstances, unexpected bills, surprise expenses, emotional purchases, never realizing that wealth is built precisely to reduce the power of those surprises. Once money begins compounding on your behalf, life transforms. Stress decreases. Options increase. You no longer fear inflation, layoffs, economic downturns, or unexpected emergencies with the same intensity, because your wealth absorbs the shocks. And when your assets generate income, your work becomes a choice rather than a necessity. That kind of independence is not just financial. It changes your psychology, your confidence, your patience, and your entire engagement with the world. No one becomes wealthy by accident, but they can become wealthy through consistency. Spend less, save more, invest wisely, and give time room to perform its magic. When your money becomes the hardest working member of your household, you finally understand why the rich keep getting richer and why you can join them the moment you choose to act accordingly. Envy is poison, and it corrodes the person who carries it far more than the person it's aimed at. Most people never admit how deeply envy shapes their financial life. They watch others succeed, start businesses, grow investments, build careers, accumulate wealth, and instead of asking, how did they do it? They mutter, they got lucky. Luck becomes a shield that protects them from responsibility. After all, if success is random, then they are innocent for not achieving it. But the truth is far more uncomfortable. Success leaves clues, and those clues are available to anyone disciplined enough to study and apply them. One of the smartest choices a person can make is to transform envy into curiosity. When you see someone living the life you wish you had, resist the urge to resent them. Instead, reverse. Engineer the path that got them there. You might discover they spent years learning a valuable skill while others were distracted. You might uncover that they saved aggressively when their friends spent recklessly. You might find that they were quietly investing during years when no one else cared about compounding. The world rarely sees the work that precedes the reward. We see the visible fruit, not the invisible roots. People sabotage themselves because envy blinds them to opportunity. They assume wealthy people possess superhuman abilities or unfair advantages. But more often than not, the real advantage was simply the willingness to do the boring work, reading, learning, practicing, failing, refining, and persisting. The raw materials for progress are available in libraries, online courses, books, and the habits anyone can adopt. The problem isn't access, it's attitude. And envy is the fastest way to kill attitude before it even gets started. Imitation is one of the most powerful tools in the world, yet it remains tragically under-used. Pick any successful person and study them, not to worship them, but to extract the behaviors that produce results. If someone has built a thriving business, figure out what they understood about customers that others ignored. If someone invested and multiplied their money, learn how they judged risk and resisted panic. If someone advanced rapidly in a field, break down the skills they mastered and the sacrifices they made. People are desperate to find shortcuts, yet stand in front of the greatest shortcut of all, learning from someone who has already done what they hope to do. The irony is that while envy feels righteous in the moment, it places you in the worst financial position possible. It keeps you focused on external unfairness rather than internal capability. It makes you emotional when you need to be rational. It distracts you from the daily habits that quietly shift trajectories. Worst of all, envy tends to produce retaliation spending, money wasted trying to look successful instead of investing to become successful. That is a surefire path to staying broke. Success, contrary to popular belief, is not scarce. It multiplies when shared through ideas, exampled models. The wisest minds in history, Buffett, Graham, Drucker, Carnegie, wrote down their strategies for anyone to read. They filmed interviews, shared principles, and laid bare their mental models. Yet very few people take advantage of this treasure chest because they convince themselves that wisdom only belongs to others. If envy erodes from within, study builds from within. You choose which voice to follow. You can accelerate your financial progress dramatically simply by identifying who you admire and learning from them with discipline instead of resentment. The moment you stop resenting success and start decoding it, your path changes. The world doesn't reward envy, it rewards competence. And competence is within reach of anyone who invests consistently in their own ability, 1 hour and one lesson at a time. Every dollar you earn is a soldier, and if you understood what those soldiers are capable of you treat them very differently. Most people send their money straight to the front lines of consumption, where it gets slaughtered instantly. That morning light, the trendy shoes, the weekend splurge, the upgraded car, all of them are small, silent battles where your financial army dies without accomplishing anything for you. Then people wonder why, year after year, they feel like they're fighting the same war with no progress. If you keep eliminating your soldiers, you'll always stay outnumbered. Money is not merely a medium of exchange. It is leverage. It is power in delayed form. Saving money isn't about deprivation. It is about recruitment. Each dollar saved is a soldier you can later deploy toward a mission that actually advances your life instead of merely decorating it. When you start thinking this way, budgeting doesn't feel restrictive. It feels strategic. You don't feel like you're sacrificing. You feel like you're planning an invasion into a future where you no longer depend on sweat, luck, or circumstance. The wealthy don't necessarily earn more soldiers in the beginning. They simply lose fewer of them to wasteful battles. They keep more, protect more, and redeploy more. Over time, those soldiers begin working in squads, in investments, in businesses, in appreciating assets. And those squads begin generating new soldiers on their own. This is the miracle most people never experience because they never let their capital survive long enough to multiply. A dollar invested is a dollar that recruits allies. A dollar spent is one that dies in the field and leaves nothing behind. Think about your spending habits over the last decade. How many of your past purchases are still adding value to your life? The vast majority disappear into memory, landfill, or the back of a closet. Meanwhile, every dollar you invested a decade ago, no matter how small the amount, has likely grown, doubled, or tripled. This is the harsh arithmetic of wealth. Even tiny amounts, if left alone to compound, become meaningful. The problem is that most people never take compounding seriously because it feels slow at first, and slow progress is intolerable in a world where everyone wants instant gratification. There's also a psychological shift that happens when you adopt the soldier mindset. You stop treating money emotionally and start treating it rationally. You no longer feel pressure to keep up with people who are killing their own soldiers faster than you. You stop buying things to impress others who don't care. You stop trading long-term strength for short-term image. You stop sabotaging yourself for applause that fades in an hour. You begin valuing financial resilience over temporary excitement. That shift alone can change a life. Sending your soldiers into battle wisely means choosing opportunities where they can win. Businesses, skills, rental properties, index funds. These are battlegrounds where money fights on your behalf long after you clock out. When deployed correctly, your army keeps growing even while you sleep. Eventually, the soldiers you invested earn so much that they fund your lifestyle without needing reinforcement from a paycheck. That point, when your soldiers fight for you, instead of you fighting for them, is where true financial freedom begins. People underestimate just how powerful that turning point is. When you no longer depend solely on your labor, the stress lifts, decision-making improves. You choose jobs, partners, projects, and environments based on interest rather than necessity. Time becomes yours again, and all of that starts with a simple but profound mindset. Protect your soldiers and send them on missions that multiply your strength instead of draining it. Every dollar has potential. Treat it with respect and direction, and it will transform your life quietly, methodically, and inevitably. Spend it thoughtlessly, and you'll always be starting from zero, no matter how hard you work. Isn't magic. It's disciplined deployment.